My husband Leroy served a dual role as a soldier in the Army for 23 years and a Texas State Trooper in Corpus Christi, Texas for 14 years. He was deployed to Camp Anaconda, Iraq, where government contractors burn hazardous waste in a 10-acre open burn pit in the ground. Waste such as batteries, paint cans, blown up Humvees, body parts from the hospital, plastic water bottles, all doused with jet fuel and burned for 24 hours a day. They burned everything that is illegal to burn in the United States. To give you a better understanding, these exposures to burning trash are similar to the toxic plume from 9/11 Ground Zero. They lived and worked next to the toxic plume of black smoke that infiltrated where they lived, ate, and slept. As a result, Leroy returned home sick and has since been diagnosed with a lung disease, a toxic brain injury, and an autoimmune disease. He's now on oxygen 24 hours a day. He returned home from war to face a healthcare system that failed him and an employer too afraid to understand an uncommon war injury, resulting in the termination of his law enforcement career. As a result of these injustices, Leroy attempted to end his life. The VA and DoD refused to recognize or diagnose these environmental injuries, often misdiagnosing him and other veterans as psychosomatic or dismissing them as compensation-driven care seeking. Our family has been impacted by this injustice. We face years of bureaucratic inertia and a system of delay and deny. We have advocated as a family on behalf of 3.5 million veterans affected by these toxic wounds of war, burn pits, and other exposures. This is an issue that affects so many veterans in our state of Texas, home the second largest veteran population in the United States. As a former Texas State Trooper and an American soldier, Leroy was forced out of his career in law enforcement due to a war injury. He requested to keep his job, but was denied this request. We were forced to go up against Texas Department of Public Safety. There are laws in place, such as USERRA, that provide job protections for our citizen soldiers, National Guard, and reservists. The Texas Supreme Court refused to hear our case, and Governor Abbott ignored our plea for help. In 2019, we took our fight to Major General Phillips, Executive Director at the Reserve Organization of America in Washington, D.C. Here's a quick excerpt from General Phillips, Executive Director, to Governor Abbott. He wrote, "Governor Abbott, we're all aware of the tragic suicides that in retrospect are judged preventable. The signs were there, we say in outrage. If only someone had paid attention. Well, the signs are there, and I think you can do something about this to make it right. And I respectfully and urgently ask that you act. Leroy Torres has given so much, returned from war terribly impaired by his service, and in return has been treated so shabbily. Yet, notwithstanding the toll, he retains fidelity to his nation. He has told us what can be done." And he said, "Governor Abbott, if we should awake to find him gone, who shall we blame?" Governor Abbott and the Texas Supreme Court failed my husband and turned their back on citizen soldiers, reservists, and National Guard who served a dual role to our state and our nation. My husband's case recently went before the United States Supreme Court last month and is now pending a decision. Texas can take the lead now on the issue of toxic exposure through the implementation of a state burn pit registry that would help thousands of veterans and their families impacted. The time is well past due for our Texas government to acknowledge these injuries and diseases as a direct result of armed conflict or caused by an instrumentality of war. We need a governor who will not hide behind the curtain of sovereign immunity, a leader who honors our veterans, a governor who will honor these injuries with compassionate common sense. This is an invitation to begin the healing process for those families who have lost loved ones to illness or death following the environmental hardships of war. Before I move on to the last part, you'll find this card on your seat, or ask Eric Olguin back there, he'll pass them out to you. So as advocates, we're now, there's now this instrumental, monumental piece of legislation that will grant presumptive benefits for cancers, lung diseases, for generations of veterans, Vietnam, Gulf War, 9/11, and we're about 90% there, so please, feel free to ask for a card or scan the QR code. It is my honor to introduce to you our next Texas governor that actually gives a damn about our law enforcement and veterans, Beto O'Rourke.
Thank you, Rosie. Folks, Rosie came in from Corpus Christi today just to be with us and to be able to share her story. I just want to thank her. One thing that has really distinguished veterans and the spouses and family members of veterans to me over the course of my life is the fact that long after their period of active service, they continue to serve this country. So I met Rosie when I was a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So she made the trip from Corpus Christi to Houston today. Back then she made the trip from Corpus Christi all the way up to Washington, D.C. to testify before these powerful members of Congress in these high positions of public trust to gain their attention and focus, and to make sure, she just said, that they actually end up giving a damn about those that they were sworn to serve and protect and do the right thing for when they had the opportunity to do it. What we know from those who served in one of the greatest generations, those are the Vietnam era veterans, who went and fought a war this country did not understand, many in this country did not support, came home from that war, many involuntarily drafted and activated, not to pats on the back and thank you for your service and ticker tape parades, but at a minimum, shrugs of indifference, and at worst, people spitting on these veterans, calling them baby killers, making them feel awful and guilty about their service to this country. Well, that generation of Vietnam era veterans just got after it, put their heads down, raised their families, built their businesses, contributed to the success of Houston, of Texas, up to the United States of America. All the while, many of them exposed to Agent Orange, this toxic substance not unlike the one that Rosie just described. And this country took not one, but 4 decades to finally do the right thing and treat exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition for the cancers and the conditions that these veterans carried that took the lives of many of them. 40 years. And it was a lack of attention and focus by members of Congress. It was the excuses that if we do this, if we do the right thing, it's going to cost this country a lot of money. And as Representative Wu just said, when you look at the cost of doing the right thing against the enormous wealth of the wealthiest country on the face of the planet, and right here, the 9th largest economy on planet Earth, that is Texas right now, it's nothing to do the right thing for those who are willing to give their lives for this country. And the fact that Rosie had the courage of her convictions and was willing to go up against those members of Congress and bring them to account is why, right now, we just talked about this in the parking lot, the bill that she worked so hard for, it's called the PACT Act, which from a federal perspective will finally force the federal government to do the right thing and fund the treatment and care for those veterans who were exposed to these toxic burn pits. It looks like it's about to pass and will soon be signed into law by Joe Biden. So I want to thank Rosie for making sure that we don't wait 40 years as the Vietnam era waited to do the right thing. We're going to do the right thing much sooner because of you and others like you. And I will say this, one last thing on what I think is one of, if not the greatest generations, the Vietnam era. Again, long after their service, and despite the way that they were treated, and maybe because of the way that they were treated when they came back to this country, those Vietnam era veterans have busted their asses to make sure that the current generation of veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and before that, the first Gulf War, have been
communism. And you're a communist. You're a George Soros funded agent. You're a loser. You're a communist. You're a fraud. You're an absolute fraud. They're fighting communism. They should start right here. You are a fraud. Absolute fraud. George Soros funded communist agent, man. You're a fraud and you're a shill. You're a fraud.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
You're a fraud.
So this. Thank you all. Thank you. There we go. Listen, thank you all. I got to tell you, not that you need me to say this, but the fact that we are here right now to discuss what this state can do for the veterans who serve this country, and that the opposition, those who support the sitting governor, treat a meeting like this in this way, disrupt a conversation not about any political party, not about even our fortunes in this next election, but about how we are going to serve those who put their life on a line for this country. That tells me everything I need to know about the other side of this race. But before we were interrupted, I was just going to say that Vietnam era veteran, maybe in part because of how she and he were treated when they came back to this country, did everything they could to make sure that the current generation of veterans get the respect and dignity that they are owed and that they have earned from this country. So this was a true team effort, getting behind Rosie and Leroy and others who made this happen right now. And it's also a testament to the fact that, as badly damaged as it may be at this moment, this American democracy can still work. And it is dependent upon all of us having some faith and willing to live that faith in the actions that we take, whether it's testifying before Congress, voting, showing up at a town hall meeting like this one on a Friday when you have so many other things to do in your lives. I'm grateful for you all being here and participating in this democracy. Grateful to the VFW Post and to the Vice Commander Ramirez, who has invited us to be here today. In his absence, we want to thank Commander Ruelas for opening up this hall. This is not, again, a partisan exercise. We're not going to ask you in terms of the next election who to vote for. We're here to talk about veterans and how fitting that we're having it at a VFW hall. So I want to thank them. And listen, I want to point out the elected officials who are here, especially Representative Wu and Representative Johnson. These folks have incredibly busy schedules, huge demands on their time. And I mean, we don't want to presume anything, but I think these two candidates, or these two office holders who are also candidates, take their elections seriously. They could be out there knocking on doors or sitting in front of political donors or raising money for their campaign. They're here right now, and they're not here to support me, although I hope they do. They're here because they support veterans, and because of the position that they have and they take so seriously, they want to make sure they're here to listen to everything every veteran here has to say. So I want to thank all elected officials, including our judges and our county chair, our city council member who is still here, actually. Thank you for joining us. I was running for Congress in 2012. I launched my campaign late the prior year. We still have a fan from that race back in 2012. And like anyone who's run for office or volunteered for someone who's run for office, a big part of a campaign is knocking on doors and meeting the voters that you want to represent and that you want to serve. And that was what I was doing. By the end of that race, I personally knocked on about 16,000 doors, and friends and family and supporters, they knocked on tens of thousands more. But I remember it was January of 2012, and I'm on the east side of El Paso, and I'm knocking on a guy's door. He answers the door, and I give him my pitch. Hey, I'm Beto O'Rourke. I'm running to represent you in the United States Congress. Here are all the great things that I'm going to do for you if you elect me. And he patiently listened to me, and he said, listen, if you want to help me, I just got off the phone with the VA here in El Paso. And mind you, this is January. And he said, I'm trying to schedule a mental health care appointment for the post-traumatic stress disorder that I have, that I incurred in service to this country back in Vietnam. And the person who answered the phone at the VA told me to call back next year because all the appointments for 2012 are already booked. I said, man, that is hard to believe. Thank you for sharing that with me. And as I walked away, I was like, that's so hard to believe. I don't believe it. This guy's just trying to make a point. He's just a mean, old, ornery Vietnam-era veteran, just trying to test me to see if I'll really believe this. Well, door after door, house after house, El Pasoan after El Pasoan, I was meeting veterans, their family members, their widows, their widowers. They were telling me the same story. You cannot get into the VA and see a mental health care provider, no matter how hard you try. So we looked into it, and we found that of 148 mental health care centers within the VA system across the United States of America, El Paso ranked 148th in the ability to see a provider. People really were waiting more than a year. And as you all probably know, a couple of years after that, there was a wait list manipulation scandal that was revealed from the VA in Arizona, where at some of these VAs, they were literally putting the wait list in a drawer, shutting the drawer, and never calling anybody on there. And you all probably know this, the veterans, more than anyone else, that delay of care became a denial of care. That denial of care produced some really tragic outcomes. That number that we are all probably familiar with, 20 to 22 veterans a day taking their own lives in this country every single day. Well, in communities like El Paso and throughout much of Texas, it was much worse. And I was meeting those who had lost their father or their husband or their wife or their grandmother in this way because we could not get our act together, because we didn't have the leadership and the accountability. So I made it my mission as a candidate, as I continue to go door to door and to give speeches in halls just like this one and to talk to members of the press and to reach out to the electorate in El Paso. This is the issue, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's not sexy. I know it may not make headlines. It never gets covered in the paper or on the news. Thank you all, by the way, for being here. But this is pretty damn important. We're literally losing people who are willing to lose their lives on a battlefield. They never imagined they would lose their lives on their suburban street outside of El Paso, Texas. That's exactly what's happening right now. We won that election. We had a 5-person primary against the sitting elected representative who, frankly, a good man and himself a veteran, but had just assumed too much maybe about what the VA in El Paso was doing, and by extension was allowing a lot of people to be harmed in our community. I really think that issue, more than any other, connected with the voters in El Paso, and we won that without a runoff. We get into Congress. I asked to serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. This may seem like a no-brainer to you, especially the veterans. Where else would you want to serve? Nobody wants to serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. It's the punishment room you get sent to if you screw up with your party leadership. It's the last place you can go to raise money, to be in front of powerful lobbyists and members of industry and the people who can cut the PAC checks for $10,000. It's a dead ender for your career. There are no big things that you can do because the VA, the conventional wisdom was, is so damn screwed up. You're never going to be part of fixing it. So you're just stuck and you're lost. I wanted to be there because I was going to fix the VA in El Paso, come hell or high water. I get on that committee, and just to show you what a backwater it was at the time, brand new freshman member, I suddenly become 3rd in seniority. I was like 2nd in seniority after that first year. Everybody on it could not wait to get off of it. You want to get on the Ways and Means Committee, the Energy Committee, the places where big money flows and your career can rise. But I loved being on the VA committee because you can really get some work done without all the politics and the grandstanding. And it happened to be one of the last true bastions of bipartisanship in a very divided country, in a very polarized Congress. So I loved it. And I focused on that El Paso VA. And I focused on the leadership at that El Paso VA. And I asked veterans just at town halls like this one, what it is that we needed to do to turn it around. In fact, I surveyed every single veteran that I could find in El Paso to find out what their priorities were, what their experience had been at the VA, what their average wait time was. I took that information, I presented it to the secretary of the VA, I presented it to the director of the local El Paso VA, I presented it to the wider community, and we built the political will, though I was in the minority in Congress at that time, to turn around the VA. And sure enough, day by day, month by month, term by term, we made progress. We made so much progress that not only were we no longer dead last in wait times to see a mental health care provider. But we built a brand new state-of-the-art TBI and PTSD clinic in El Paso, connected to the Texas Tech University Health Science Center and the University Medical Center. We were really making the most of public and private partnerships in El Paso to complement and supplement what the VA was already doing there. And in addition, when I would write legislation that came from meetings just like these, someone just like you would raise their hand and say, hey Beto, why don't you do something about those veterans who have an other than honorable discharge? And for those of you who are not veterans and don't understand this, if you have an other than honorable discharge, previously, that precluded you from setting foot in a VA. So it doesn't matter how injured you were, what level of service you performed for this country, you could literally not by law go into the VA and get that care that I think you earned and that you deserve. So we wrote a bill that was going to allow other than honorable veterans with that kind of discharge to get into the VA. And it was beautiful, but it was worth all the paper it was written on if I couldn't get it passed. And remember, I was in the minority. So I talked to my Republican colleague on the committee, Mike Kaufman from Colorado. I said, Mike, I got a great idea. You're gonna love it. We gotta help these guys and these gals, but it's gonna cost us some money. We gotta get it past our colleagues. Are you willing to help? And he was, but he said, I like what you've written, but I would change a few things. And if you're open to some consensus, and hold on, this is a 4-letter word, but I'm gonna say it out loud, some compromise, then I'd like to be your partner in this. And I said, hey, I'm in. Because I'm not going back to that veterans town hall and telling them that I wrote this beautiful bill, but these damn Republicans are standing in the way and just keep re-electing me year after year, and one of these days I'll be in the majority, and then we'll get it done. No, I gotta go back to them with some results. And so Kaufman and I wrote this bill together, presented it to our colleagues, all 435 of them in the House of Representatives. We said, listen, is this gonna be expensive to extend care to tens of thousands of veterans who've been denied it before? Well, yes, it's going to cost more money than we're currently spending by definition. Should there be a consequence if you're discharged with an other than honorable discharge? Yes, there should be. But it shouldn't be your life, because OTH veterans were killing themselves at twice the rate of other veterans, which is already higher than the general population. So we really have a crisis and an epidemic on our hands, folks. We made the case, both of us from both sides of the aisle, and we passed that sucker 435-0. We passed it in the Senate. None other than Donald J. Trump signed it into law. I probably agree with the guy on almost nothing, but there was enough common ground on this one to get it done. I say that because some folks will ask Ann Johnson, well, let's say Beto is elected governor, and he's a Democrat. And despite her best efforts, Ann and Jean are still in the minority. Beto's working the Republican majority legislature. Is he going to be able to get anything done? The answer to that is yes. And not only aspirationally, we have done that before, I would argue, under much tougher and more hostile circumstances. If we do not allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, if we're willing to make progress, work with anyone, anytime, anywhere, there's nothing that's going to stop us on our priorities. Let me leave you with 3 that I have heard from listening to veterans across the state of Texas, certainly here in Houston, but up in the Panhandle, in Deep East Texas, back home in my hometown of El Paso. Here are just 3 priorities. There are a dozen I could list right now, but I want to make sure there's time for other people to get into the conversation. Here are 3 that I've heard of, and here's my plan to work with Jean and Ann and their colleagues from both sides of the aisle to get them done. First thing that I want to make sure that we do is end veterans' homelessness. There are thousands of veterans in the state of Texas who right now are on the streets of our communities. And I know you all know this, but it bears repeating. No one chooses to be homeless. No one just says, you know what, I'm going to walk out of my home, I'm going to walk out of my job, I'm going to walk out of any treatment and care, I'm going to walk away from my ability to provide for my loved ones so I can go sleep under a bridge or on the street. No one chooses that. And everything else only becomes possible once you have that roof over your head, that house and that home that you can go to at the end of the day, that place where you can shower before you go in for that job interview. I was talking to a man experiencing homelessness here in Houston a couple of years back, and I naively said, you know, why don't you get a job? I said something like that. I'm embarrassed to even say that out loud right now. Why don't you get a job so that you can, you know, buy a house or rent an apartment? And he so patiently and graciously looked at me and said, you know, Beto, Imagine not being able to take a shower or to clean yourself or being in the same pair of dirty, soiled clothes and then going out there and finding a job. Everything begins with the home. You help me with that, I'm getting that job. I'm getting that help. I'm going to get myself back on my feet and on the right track. But it begins with the home. And the fact that there are thousands of veterans in the 9th largest economy on the planet who do not have a house today will accrue to our lasting shame unless we do something about it right now. And folks, we've got the resources. Gene mentioned, I think the biannual budget is $250 billion in the state of Texas. If we could find $5 billion to activate involuntarily members of the Guard to send them to the border, to build the border wall, to send all these DPS troopers down there, not having done anything effectively to stem the challenges that we have at the border because they require real solutions and not stunts, well then certainly we have the resources to do something for those homeless veterans. So here are 3 points that I would like you to consider, and I'd like my future colleagues in the legislature to consider. 1, we've got to build more housing. There have to be more homes available for these veterans. So I'm going to make sure, working with colleagues in the legislature, that the state of Texas invests in that veteran housing, works with the VA and the Housing and Urban Development Department at the federal level for the HUD-VASH voucher, and make sure that we have the capacity here in Houston, in El Paso, and every other part of the state to get that done. Second, having listened to and met with a lot of veterans, part of the challenge is not just the housing stock that may not be available, but the lack of services that those veterans need to have the sustainability and consistency and predictability in their lives. When you live in the least insured state in the country and you have a hard time seeing a doctor, when you don't get that career help that you need, or you cannot afford that higher education that Representative Wu was talking about, it's pretty hard to make sure that you can stay in that home. So ensuring that the Texas Veterans Commission and every complementary agency in the state of Texas provides those wraparound services, mental health, primary health, career counseling, in addition to the housing, is going to help keep those veterans in their homes and ensure that they're successful. Third point, last one on this one, is the property taxes are too high in the state of Texas. They've gone up $20 billion in the last 7 years since Greg Abbott has been governor. $20 billion, that's a 40% increase. And while veterans who have earned a 100% service-connected disability have real relief from property taxes, if you are at 70 to 100% or even lower than 70%, it's really marginal, the help that you get from the state of Texas. So look, I want to protect all homeowners and renters from rising property taxes, and we have a larger plan to do that. But I want to work with these colleagues in the legislature to reduce the pressure on veterans especially, and especially those with some service-connected disability. And again, for those watching at home and those who may not be veterans or have veterans in their families, a service-connected disability means that you were injured in service to this country, and it compromises your ability to work and earn an income. We therefore have the obligation to help you make ends meet. That's always been the bargain we've struck, although our government has not always lived up to it. So those are 3 things we can do to address housing. Second big issue that I want to work on with everybody here, that is mental health care and veteran suicide. It is tough for us to talk about suicide, but it's really important that we do, because if we fail to face and confront it, we're never going to focus on it, and we're never going to improve it. We probably all in this room know somebody who has taken their lives or tried to take their lives, and among the veterans community, the rate, as I said earlier, is much, much higher. So what are some things that we can do to turn this around? First of all, I want to acknowledge that the Texas Veterans Commission does a pretty good job, and I put them up against veterans commissions from just about any other state. And having worked with colleagues on the Veterans Affairs Committee in Congress from almost every other state, they will tell you the same thing. But TVC simply does not have the capacity to address a crisis of this magnitude. So I want to work with the legislature to make sure that Health and the Human Services Commission, which is a much larger agency with real capacity, can help us with intake and case management to connect veterans with the care that they've earned. They've all earned it, but they're not all connected to it. So HHSC is going to be a big boon to helping us do that. Point number 2 on mental health care and veteran suicide. We got to make sure that cannabis is legal in the state of Texas. At a meeting just like this one, in El Paso, I met a veteran who had served in Iraq. He came all the way to the front. There were probably 3 times the people in that hall at UTEP that day. And he said, I just want to tell you that when I came back from Iraq, I was prescribed an opioid. And maybe now, in hindsight, predictably, he became addicted to it. The VA, seeing his addiction in maybe a way that only the VA could do, cut him off from his prescription and didn't provide anything else for him to deal with the pain that he was suffering. And so this guy had the courage to come before everybody at that town hall at the microphone and say, I just want you to know that I am buying heroin right now on the streets of El Paso. It is the only way that I can take care of myself. He was asking for help. That's what he was doing that day. I cannot tell you the number of veterans who've said, listen, I don't want to be prescribed an opioid. I don't want to take it. I may become addicted to it. I may die from it, as too many veterans are right now. Please allow me to legally use marijuana in the state of Texas. It's the one thing that allows my symptoms to be manageable, that makes life worth living for me, that increases my appetite, that allows me to sleep. I mean, I've heard this from veterans from all ages and all demographics and all geographics and all backgrounds in the state of Texas. It makes so much common sense that we have got to do it. And I think we should do it for other purposes beyond this, but there's no more compelling reason for me than to answer that request that I've heard from so many of our fellow veterans. So that's something that we can do as well. I want to make sure I didn't leave anything else. Oh yeah, there's one other thing, and I want to commend the judge because he runs a veterans treatment court here in Houston, in Harris County. So there are, Judge, 26 of these across the state. It's the first one here, and then there are maybe 25 others, roughly around the state.
People from other counties, when there are smaller counties that don't have them, they're roughly about that number.
So this is amazing, and I love the fact that the judge is here, that he just described this as a model for much of the rest of the country. And again, for those who have not experienced this is a diversionary court, essentially. If the veterans tangle with the law is a result of substance abuse or mental health care issues, they can go before this judge, and we don't incarcerate them, we don't lock them up, we don't give them a criminal record. We really give them a chance to better themselves at no risk or danger to the public. In fact, I think you decrease and diminish the risk and danger to the public, and you improve public safety and security. But there are más o menos 25, 26 of these across the state of Texas. They're great, but they're not enough for all the veterans that we have who could use the help right now. So increasing and expanding these courts is the third thing that we can do, because it's definitely connected to access to the care that people need when confronting challenges of mental health care and suicide. Okay, last big issue, and then I'll close. The last big issue is the one that Rosie has been leading for so much of her life on, and this is exposure to these toxic burn pits. What can the state of Texas do? Well, she talked about a few of them. A burn pit registry here in the state of Texas, following up on the great work, by the way, that Representatives Johnson and Wu have already done on this issue, but as governor, making sure that it is fully funded so that we get everybody in the state who is exposed. And again, remember the analog to the Vietnam era veterans who had to wait 40 years for our government to do the right thing. We have the chance right now, because we have the resources, to fully fund that and to make sure that we get that right. The second thing is fully supporting this PACT Act, which again, we hope is in the final stretch of being passed and signed into law by Joe Biden. But if not, or if we have to improve or amend it, I'm going to be looking to Rosie as governor to make sure that the state of Texas can take a leading role in making sure that we're doing the right thing. And then lastly, Rosie mentioned her husband, Leroy. And Leroy, who came back from serving his country with this exposure that made him sick, working for a state agency that made no accommodation for the pain that he was going through. He said, listen, I want to continue to serve this state. I want to continue to work for the people of Texas. But what you're asking me to do right now in this current position is too painful given what I came back from service with. Could I have another job, a desk job, or a job that does not exacerbate the problems that I have? And essentially the state of Texas, through our Texas Supreme Court and our governor, Greg Abbott, said, no, I'm sorry, tough luck, go find another job somewhere else. As governor, again, I'm going to work with our colleagues here to make sure that we make every single accommodation possible for every veteran who's been exposed to these toxic benefits. So, there are a million things that we could have raised today, but I just wanted to share with you 3 things that have come through loud and clear as I've listened to people across the state of Texas, making sure that we end veterans homelessness, which I think we can do in the first year of our administration. It's an ambitious goal, but I know that we can achieve it. We're Texans, we can do big things. Reducing significantly the rate of veteran suicide in the state of Texas, and improving mental health care access, and then addressing burn pit exposure from our Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans to make sure that we don't wait 40 years like we did with the Vietnam era. Those are 3 big ideas that I think we as a state together can lead on. Thank you all for being here today. Looking forward to what you have to say, getting as many people into the conversation as possible. Gracias.
All right, if you don't have a question, raise your hand and I will bring the mic to you.
And Cynthia's got an alcohol swab, so she's sanitizing it just to make sure we're safe.
Hello, my name is Julie, and I'm a Navy veteran. There are a couple of things that maybe you would like to follow up with me, because I still need some connections inside House members and the House Majority Committee office, Andrea Goldstein in particular. But I am a survivor of something that's medicine's dirty little secret. I was drugged and raped by a doctor at Auntie Murphy VA Hospital in 1986. I finally got the Texas State Board of Medical Examiners to bring him up on charges. They negotiated and suspended his license for 5 years, but with a stay of suspension. And so the VA let him keep working for 8 more years. They let him retire with flying colors. He was already collecting Colonel Air Force retirement, and now he has VA and medical school professor retirement. He went over to the other side of San Antonio at the state hospital and got caught doing it again. The VA never wanted to deal with me for a PTSD claim until I proved to them that he'd done it again. But here is my major issue. There are things about my PTSD claim that were handled completely wrong. I went back to the Texas State Board of Medical Examiners in Austin to try and get records from their investigation, from the hearing, from their negotiations with him. And they're allowed to destroy records. They're gone. And they wouldn't even tell me how long, but we're legally entitled not to have to keep them, so bye. And as governor, things like that, I mean, not just veterans, anybody who is harmed by a licensed medical professional, those records have got to be saved, and they have to be more accountable. I mean, it is doctors judging doctors. And we need help.
Julie, I'm so grateful that you're here for your service to our country in the first place. And then again, your service right now, I can't imagine the courage you had to summon to say all of this publicly in front of all of us. And I just want you to know, all of us are with you right now. And there's a lot of love in this room for you. We're grateful to you. And I know you say what you just did because you do not want this to happen to anybody else. And as you told us your story, you made the case because the VA did not take you at your word. They wouldn't help you. They wouldn't even work with you. And it happened again to another person that we know it could happen to a number of other people. So yes, on your request at the state level to do everything we can to listen to and believe victims, to make sure that records are not destroyed, to hold those in the highest positions of trust, including medical providers, accountable for their actions. And in Texas, as the representatives know, we have the Texas Medical Board, which is filled with cronies, as are most boards and commissions in the state of Texas, of those who are already in power, including the governor. And there are certainly issues there that we have with accountability and responsibility and consequences for behavior that harms patients and the people of Texas. So appointing people and then holding them accountable, not based on their donations, but based on their expertise and their ability to serve the public, that should not be something that I have to say because it is such a low bar. But in Texas right now, we have to say it. And then with the VA, I think sometimes at a state level, we say, you know what, that's a federal responsibility. Not much we can do there. I think this current governor has shown that if Texas wants to, we'll take on federal responsibilities. So let us do it in this case, not in the showboating, stunt-taking kind of way that Governor Abbott's doing on the border, but in actually trying to help veterans. Though that may be a federal responsibility primarily, we have more veterans in this state than nearly any other state. I think California just has a few more thousand than we have here in the state of Texas. But you are our pride, and we want to make sure that we've got your back and we're doing everything we can to honor your service and treat you with the dignity and respect that you're owed and that you've earned. So I look forward to working with you. And you asked at the beginning, you said, we may want to follow up with you, and we do. So I'm just going to ask Cynthia and our team to make sure that we get your contact information. Looking forward to staying in touch with you. Thank you so much. Gracias.
I will make sure to get that. I have a question back here, and I see your hands that are up. I will make my way to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming and being here today, because our what we're here for, it matters to us. So for us to leave work and come over here today, it's important to us. Real quick point, and then I want to ask a question. So the whole legalization of cannabis, I was there at the legislative session back when there was a bill that came up about it. And I've never in my life seen so many people at the Capitol to try to get it passed. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I've never indulged. So I'm like, well, why are they trying to, so hearing the stories of the veterans and then the parents of children who have been suffering from different diseases and cancer, and just hearing how it helps them. So though I've never indulged, I am definitely for it. But today I want to talk about women veterans, because they're really women veterans and their children. It's never really a part of the conversation, women veterans and their children. Personally, I was on the Texas Veterans Commission where we gave out money all across the state. I would have to compete, almost flip tables over, because it was either women veterans or equine therapy. So I'm like, we're giving more money to these damn horses. I get it's good for PTSD. What about the woman who served and has children and sleeping in her car? We talked about homelessness. We have so many programs for homelessness. I get it, but what about women veterans and their children? She's not gonna be on the corner with a sign with her babies. She's not. She's scared to go for help because she doesn't want anyone to take her babies. So can we possibly get more support, even with Women Veterans Day 2017? I remember knocking door to door, and getting the backlash saying, well, why do women veterans need their own day? Because we do. Because we have our own things we want to celebrate each other for. And it passed, but it was a lot that we had to do to get it passed. So I would like to start having women veterans and their children in the conversation when we talk about the guns.
Thank you so much. And Cynthia, another person, I would love to take you at your word and your offer. I heard an offer in there to help us get this done. Because, there's what I could come up with on my own, which will not be a tenth as good as what you're going to be able to lead on if we will just follow you on this. You've thought about it, you've understood it, you've lived it. So let that accrue to the benefit of the people of Texas through this office. I absolutely want to do that, and I do understand. And there are some exceptions within the VA system in the state of Texas, but so many of these VAs are set up primarily for men. And as you just suggested, women are an afterthought. And there are some exceptions where they've set up women's clinics and where they've hired specialists specifically for women veterans. And I love that that's happening in some cases, but it is so often the exception in the state of Texas instead of being the rule that it should be, especially when you look at the composition of today's United States military. Women have always served over the course of this nation's history, but never more so than at this moment. And we are no way prepared for when they retire or when they separate and become veterans in our community. So I'll look forward to working with you on this and finding out whether through TVC or HHSC, as we just suggested earlier, there's a way that we can do a better job at a state level to complement what the federal government's doing with the VA. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
choices about their own bodies. Okay, so most of us here use Michael E. DeBakey as our healthcare. Number one, you can't even park in the freaking parking lot because it's so small. You're waiting 30 days to see your specialist. We're waiting 30 days to get cervical cancer screenings, mammograms. What happened to me, I had a cervical test that came back a little funky. I needed to see the next level care. They put me on a wait list to see a civilian provider for 45 days. If you go to...
What's going through your head for 45
exactly.
days when you're on that wait list?
If you go to a specialty like pain clinic and you say, I'm in pain, they won't treat you because you're a woman. So we're not allowed to even make, I have an ingrown toenail, I want my toenail treated. We're not even allowed to make those choices about our body. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. Rhonda, thank you for being here. By the way, this is why we have these town halls, because as much as I've listened to people across the state, I haven't heard this specific challenge here. And I'm sure if you have it here, you have it in other parts of the state. You know, again, while this is primarily a federal responsibility, it does not absolve us in the state of Texas from doing our part, because we have the resources. And you're frankly closer to being a constituent of mine if I'm governor than you are to the president, all the way in Washington, D.C., right? And you have my cell phone number, so I know I've got to face you at some point. So I think funding as a complement to the VA, where the VA falls short. I talked about that public-private partnership that we forged in El Paso, where we had that state-of-the-art clinic that was built in conjunction with Texas Tech University Health Science Center. Here we are next to the biggest medical center, I think, in the world, but certainly the United States of America. There's got to be more that we can do and more that we can leverage to make sure that you're not waiting 30 days or 45 days. And if your experience was 45, we got to know that there are others who had twice that, right? Who were waiting 3 months or longer. As we learned in El Paso, it could be a year to see somebody who could literally save your lives. The other thing that I know is that while veterans are never ones to mince words, very often I have found they're not going to raise their hand and say, hey, over here I need some help, or I'm upset about the way this thing works. They say, you know what, this is the way the system is, and I'm just going to put my head down and get after it, and I guess these are the rules that we have to operate by. The fact that you're willing to stand up not just for yourself but other veterans, make sure that those, the quiet ones who are suffering this in silence, actually get the help that they need as well. So I would love to work with you to make sure that as we make the case to the legislature about how we want to deploy resources to support women veterans in this state, that we're doing it effectively, that we're doing it in a targeted fashion, and that it actually helps. And this is super important, I think this is why we have historically so many problems with the VA, that we're holding each other accountable. That lack of accountability, the people fleeing the Veterans Affairs Committee, which is the accountability and oversight mechanism in our federal government for the VA, that's how you got into the hole that we're in and trying to get ourselves out of right now. So having conversations and meetings like these and regular accountability check-ins, I think is going to be helpful in actually getting this done at the end of the day. But you have my commitment to do that. And again, with the veteran who spoke previous to you, would love to work with you on what that specific plan looks like. But you've got my commitment. Thank you, Rhonda, for being here.
To your right.
Hey Beto, thank you for taking the time out and coming over here and showing us your support. My name is Nato, I'm one of the Marines here. This question is more geared towards veteran entrepreneurial. So along with the veterans, there's a lot of small business owners here in Houston, from restaurants to car shops to to everyday services that you need. A lot of us are in a hurt locker because of COVID, especially the ones in the restaurant industry like myself. Now there's programs out there that help small businesses, which I'm very thankful for. I'm not knocking it, I'll take it. However, when I was looking for help specifically for veteran-owned businesses outside the Veterans Chamber of Commerce, there's really not anyone out there to support us. I mean, specifically us, to keep our business going, because we are the ones that are dialed into the community. We know the people, yet when hard times hit, it seems to hit us a little harder. Do you have anything planned in terms of trying to show support for specifically veteran-owned businesses?
Thanks for asking the question. I think elevating those veteran-owned businesses and ensuring, just on our own personally, and then in positions of trust through the government, ensuring that veterans have every opportunity to compete for and succeed in winning contracts, and winning customers, and being economically successful. Again, given what those veterans have done for this country, I think that's the least that we can ask from ourselves. Programmatically, as we rewrote the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is primarily focused on earned educational benefits, but we looked at how we could connect that to unions, the helmets to hard hats idea, which if you don't want to go to college, it's just not your thing, you want to be an electrician and you want to have a connection to the IBEW in your community or a local contractor who's willing to train you, we wanted to make sure that we facilitated that. One of the discussions came up, what if that returning veteran does not want to go to college, maybe he already has college under the belt, maybe that's not for them, doesn't see themselves in a trade or with a union, but is an entrepreneur and wants to start a business and needs that initial seed capital or help. And with no track record, I mean, you've been in Afghanistan and Iraq for the last 7 or 8 years, deployed in different parts of the country. You don't have a track record as an entrepreneur and a business owner. Which bank is going to take a chance on you? And so what if, in the same way that we provide the resources for continuing education and entry into the trades, we did that for veteran entrepreneurs? You may know this number, and this may not be precise, but it's directionally correct. The World War II generation, upon coming back from Asia and Europe to the United States, I think they had a business creation rate of over 40%. Over 40% of returning veterans ended up having some kind of entrepreneurial track record upon coming back. The IAVA generation, it's something like 8% or 7% or lower. We're not ensuring that the resources match the talent, the drive, the energy, and the potential. So again, as with some of these other issues, this is a little bit of uncharted territory for the state of Texas, but I'd really like to explore what we could do to supplement what the VA may already be doing or may not be doing, and make sure that we get these resources to veterans who could use it. And again, just to be really clear to everyone, not a handout, not a giveaway, something that was earned in service to this country, and an investment that produces a return, not just for that veteran and their family and their employees, but really for the community when they are successful. So again, we'd love to work with you on that and explore the ideas you might have as a small business owner about how we could apply that to other veterans. Thank you for being here, for asking us, for having us. Thank you.
Beto, thank you for being here. And my colleague and friend, Representative Jarvis Johnson, couldn't be here, so he sent his mother, Cleo.
Oh, right on.
So they are
Thank you.
And our question is, we know you're talking to the National Guardsmen that are out on the border. What is the consequence to their businesses and their families back home with their presence there?
Representative Ann Johnson, thank you again for being here. And folks, anyhow, having traveled the state and knowing a lot of people who hold office, this is pretty exceptional for someone to take this much time out of their day and away from what they're doing to listen to people who may or may not even be in their district. We don't know where everybody came from right now. So not for political advantage, but to do the right thing. She's asking, 10,000 members of the Guard in Texas were involuntarily activated. Told in some cases, in a matter of days, pack up all your stuff, tell your boss you're going to be gone, say goodbye to your kids, to your wife, or to your husband, and you are on a 1-year deployment to the U.S.-Mexico border, whereas some of these Guards members have told me they feel like a mall cop. They're sitting in a Humvee on a cell phone. They may, over the course of months, not see a single undocumented immigrant or drug trafficker or human smuggler. And we really do have those challenges at the border. I don't want to minimize that at all. But to ask somebody who does not have the constitutional authority to apprehend or detain somebody who might pose a threat to this country, someone who's there maybe because Tucker Carlson was goading Greg Abbott into doing this and inviting all of Greg Abbott's primary opponents onto TV until Greg Abbott promised to send the Guard to the border. This is providing real hardship for people who were inspired to join the Guard in many cases because they saw what Guard members did here in Houston in 2017 during Harvey. They said, I saw Guard members literally save the lives of people who were otherwise going to drown. I said, that's for me. If there's a disaster, if there's a crisis, I want to be in there. I want to put my life on the line. Guard members who looked at those who served our country in wars overseas and said, hey, if you need to send me to Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm all in. And as you all know, with those kinds of deployments, they're warned months in advance to get their affairs in order. But to be asked to go for a year on days' notice to be part of this political theater, it is killing the morale of these Guard members, and unfortunately it's taking their lives along with it. 4 of them so far have taken their lives over the course of Operation Lone Star and this involuntary deployment. 3 others have died in accidental circumstances. All of them, to Representative Johnson's point, had to leave their careers. And in many cases, they were school teachers, and we have a shortage of school teachers right now. They were nurses, they were physicians, they were primary care providers, where we have a shortage in all of those areas throughout every single part of the state. Speaking to a nurse who was posted to Del Rio, one of these Guard members, he said, I'm a nurse at a hospital in San Antonio, and I wish so badly I could be there right now, because I spend my entire day in this Humvee, seeing no one, able to do nothing of consequence, while my colleagues back at that hospital really need my help right now. So here's what I've learned by listening to them. This is the action I would take as governor. I would end this involuntary deployment and bring these Guard members back to their families. I commit that I would never activate members of the Guard unless there were a real emergency or a real crisis that necessitated their service. They're real people. They've got real lives that they're living right now. They cannot be used as political pawns. And that's how they feel. And these guys, by the way, many of them guys that I'm talking to, they may not vote for me in this next election. Many of them volunteered that they voted for Greg Abbott in the last one. But they're the ones using this language about being pawns and political theater and feeling like a mall cop on the border right now. This is not the way to treat those who are in the fair minority of this country, of people willing to sign up to put their lives on the line for this country. Deep, deep disrespect this current governor is showing them. So, Representative Johnson, to your point, real costs being borne by these Guard members and their families. There's no reason that we have to continue this, and we must learn from it going forward and make sure that we only activate them when it's truly necessary. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Hello, Governor. I'm going to claim it. It's great to see you again. You know, I'm still doing the same thing, fighting for legalization of cannabis in Texas. As we talked before, you know that I have a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is a nerve damage on the right side of my face. I can't eat, talk, drink, wash my face, brush my teeth. It's very hard to live with. I was just hospitalized for 2 weeks for it, and the doctor gave me some wrong medicine, Dilantin, and now I have a shake in my hand. It's taken me 4 weeks to try to get over it. So that's a lot what veterans go through, where they're given too much medicine. I have to take 22 pills a day just to get through what I get through, and I'm tired of it. You know, cannabis helps me. Some of those pills I put down, and I take concentrate, dabs, and I smoke cannabis. Now, I know you've heard me say that before because I'm not afraid to do that, you know. So what we need is a fantastic governor, you know, that's going to pass these bills. You know, I have an organization called Cannabis Reform in Houston. It's on Facebook. Instagram is Free the Weed HTX. Free the weed, but you know. So, but you know how it goes in Austin. Representative Johnson, me and her stayed up to 6 o'clock, and I love you for that, one night to testify for cannabis bills, right? So it's got to start with the representatives, it goes to the senators, and it goes through judiciary committees, and then they have to vote on it, and then it comes to you, okay? So you know how it goes. It can't just be just straight you to legalize it, you know. So what I want to know, along with me, as I go to the representatives and senators, I knock on their doors. This 88 legislation, I'm going to do it, you know. I'd love to have you with me, but when you're the governor, I know you got to be up there and get ready to sign these bills when it gets to you. Please, God. But what I want to know is, what are you going to do to work with these representatives, work with the senators, John Whitmire, you know, and all of these people to make sure that the right bills are passed. Now, the Compassionate Act does not have trigeminal neuralgia on it. What I have. So that is so unfair, Beto. It's not right. So I'm still medicating myself to stay alive for my husband and my daughter. Okay, so that's what I want to know. You know that these bills need to have inflammation. It needs to have depression. That is what these veterans and me go through. Depression, anxiety, and all this good stuff. You know what I'm talking about. And we had a bill in 2019, 1865, that had these bills. And it was dead on arrival in 2019. I'm telling you, because I've been going up there and testifying. If it's just going to be me, this black woman in Houston, Texas, LaTanya Whittington, to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better. So what I want to know is, how are we going to work together to work with these reps and these senators to make sure that the right bill is set on your desk to sign?
First of all, I'm going to get out of the way of you. You're amazing, and I have known you going back 5 years from when I first met you in Houston, and when you first brought this attention from your perspective and experience to my attention. And I'm just grateful to you. And we talk about those who are quietly doing the work, and sometimes loudly doing the work, but doing the work nonstop, regardless of what they tell us we can or cannot do. We say, you know what, I know you say I can't, but I've got to try it. I'm going to keep trying until we get this done. One day we are going to get this done. And it's going to be you and people like you who've been in the trenches for years, fighting this sometimes very lonely battle, to whom the credit will be owed. But you're asking me what I'm going to do. You know, Lincoln said public sentiment is everything. And in a democracy, we've got to make sure that we have a government that reflects the will of the people. And as you know, most Texans, and these are Republicans and Democrats and independents and non-voters and black and white and Mexican American and 10 generations, and they just got here 10 days ago. It doesn't matter. Most Texans support legalization of cannabis in this state. Those in 68%, you're telling me now. Most Texans support this. So why are most legislators and all statewide officials standing in the way? It's because we haven't brought this full democracy to bear on them. And that explains why we haven't expanded Medicaid. That explains why we've outlawed abortion beginning at conception with no exception for rape or incest. These are not popular issues. You know, the rest of the country thinks that we're all crazy here in the state of Texas because we're making headlines for all the wrong reasons. But that doesn't describe us. That's not the 30 million of our fellow neighbors. That's those who are in power right now. So first things first, winning political power and resetting this conversation around our priorities, including legalization of marijuana, is huge. And that's going to send a shockwave through the state legislature, Republicans and Democrats alike. And then I know that when Representative Johnson's colleagues on the other side of the aisle hear from these veterans who say that they have PTSD or traumatic brain injury or survived military sexual trauma or have fibromyalgia or other conditions, you mentioned depression and others, or they just want to be able to get high and they're adults and they don't want to be criminals in the eyes of the law. When those representatives hear from their people that public sentiment that could threaten their re-election in 2024, I think that they're going to do the right thing. And we're going to make sure that we do this on Texas terms. As you just said, we are sick, and I know the representatives are sick and tired of this. We're sick of a governor who thinks that he can govern by dictate. He can say, hey, Greg Abbott says this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to spend billions of dollars without ever asking the state legislature. That's not our game. That's not what a democracy looks like. I'm going to work in concert with Ann Johnson and Jean Wu, who may feel a little bit differently than I do on this. And as I said with that veterans bill earlier, you got to have some consensus. You got to make some compromise. You can't allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. And then watch out, because we're going to get something Done. So whether it's beginning by expanding the compassionate use program, that's not my ideal. Frankly, that's not what I want to get to. That doesn't get me excited. But if that's where we have to start, that's where we have to start. But my goal is to get to full legalization for adults with controls, with regulation, that is taxed like other states tax it, that brings in, conservatively speaking, about $500 million a year and saves us $500 million from locking up people, including veterans, for using something that's legal in most of the rest of the country. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Thank you. Got you.
If y'all don't mind, I just want to step right here because I want everybody to see the back of my church. I want you to see the back of my church.
I love it. Thank you.
My name is Ronald Lynch. I'm a disabled veteran, Army veteran. I'm getting nervous all of a sudden. And the nervous comes from, I suffer from PTSD, from military, sexual trauma. I have anxiety. There's so much that I can go on, but despite all that, I went into the military. My father served. I had a brother that served. So it was almost something that I had to do. I'm glad I did. Initially, I didn't want to go into the military. My daddy said, "You was going into the military." I said, "I'm not going into the military." I went into the military. I thank God I did. I had some challenges while in the military, some things that happened that I'm working on right now. When the gentleman mentioned about Veterans Court, officer pulled me over, and I'm not sure what he saw in me. But at this time, he didn't even know he didn't know my name. But the first thing he asked me, "Sir, are you a veteran?" I didn't know what he saw in me, what I was at that particular time, what I was going through. But he said, "Sir, you need to get some help." I don't even know what he meant by that. But they transported me to the VA hospital. From the VA hospital, that's how somehow I ended up with the Veterans Court. From the Veterans Court, they sent me to St. Petersburg, Florida, for treatment at the PTSD program. They say one of the best programs in the United States. It was very, very helpful to me. I would encourage any and everybody. I spoke to a couple of veterans prior to the meeting starting. It's just so important that we get the help when we can't get the help. And this is why we need to try, this is why we're going to elect Mr. Beto as governor, because I think, I really feel, I've been watching you on YouTube. I follow the link they send me. I know a little about political because of my father. You seem like you really care about the veterans, not just the veterans, but the citizens of Texas, and this is what we really need. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I just want to say this. I'm no longer serving in the military, but I want to serve veterans now as much as I possibly can. I had an opportunity while in Florida, here in Houston, and in St. Louis to go into some homes for veterans, some senior citizen homes, and they're just so forgotten. The family members don't even come see them anymore. And that just eats at your heart. And so I may not ever be able to serve as governor or any office, and that's okay. But I'm always going to serve my veterans and do whatever I possibly can. So one thing I want to do is, like the young lady was saying, trying to be a spokesman for women veterans. When you become governor, don't forget about Ronald Lynch wanting to help serve veterans. Whatever they
Cynthia, you heard that. We're working with Mr. Lynch. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Here we go. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you, Beto, again for being here today and being such a big supporter of veterans. I myself am a Marine Corps veteran. I'm also thank you so much for taking on the VA, especially with the healthcare system. When I was pregnant, I was denied prenatal care by the VA. while I was married to an elected official. He made calls, tried to do everything he could. I still didn't get care. So thank you for doing everything that you can and that you will to make the changes to take care of veterans, especially women veterans.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for what you're doing. A lot of people who are committed to working together right now, and that's the way it's going to get done. You all are amazing. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, Beto.
Hi there.
Hey, my name is Christian. I'm a ex-hospital corpsman out of the Navy, and so I just wanted to see if I have a problem that I had faced once I got out of the military. Is that I could do X, Y, Z in the medical field, and everyone knows they love their medics, and even you mentioned earlier that you would see someone that needs to save a life, and you'd pull them out real quick. And they're all capable of that, really, with all those abilities and more. Now, once you get out, I find myself having a hard time finding a job that accepts those credentials and things that I have learned. I mean, I was out there teaching Marines how to save lives and things along those lines at a higher standard. And once I got out, I find myself pushing the start button on the vitals machine. I just feel like with everything that the military, Fort Sam Houston is right here in San Antonio. It's the medical base that teaches all the branches of the medical miscellaneous that they learn through their career. And I just want some more transparency as far as what is getting transferred over from the experience that we've gained and all the traumas that we've gone through. I mean, most of the time, all of our experience comes from the first time we've seen someone get amputated, and now we're jumping into action. And it's just everything comes very naturally. But now I feel that all that's just being thrown out the window once I got out, and now I'm stuck here looking for a minimum wage job, checking vital signs, or just not taking full advantage of the skills that I had attained through our military.
Thank you for this question. And Cynthia, I want to make sure that Gina, who I know is watching this, she's our policy director, and she's helping us to put together the policy proposals that I want to share with Jean and Ann and other representatives to see if we get these done. I want Gina to tell us what we can do on credentialing. So as you just suggested, you've got all the experience in the world. You come back to Texas, and we make you start over from scratch as though you hadn't done any of that stuff. And as you said, you may be working a minimum or close to minimum wage job. That's not right at any level. And at a time that we are 20,000, just in the nursing profession, 20,000 nurses short, and short in other key critical medical professions, we need you at your highest and best use, whatever that is. So easing the path of any obstacles for you to be able to do that is a big thing, and not just for those in the medical profession. We know that there are those with engineering backgrounds, truck drivers who've driven some of those treacherous roads in Afghanistan and have to start over from scratch right here when they come back into Texas. We want to make sure that, look, you've already proven yourself over there. You had to get credentialed through the United States military. Let's make sure that it transitions and applies here. One other thing that I'd like to add to that is at Fort Bliss, 32,000 active duty service members there. I met so many of their spouses, men and women who came with their husband or wife to Fort Bliss, and they were a cosmetologist or a school teacher or any number of other professions that require licensure or credentialing in another state, and then to have it not transfer into the state of Texas. And again, these spouses say, hey, I love El Paso. I cannot find a job doing the thing that I've been doing for the last 20 years. Help me out. So I want to make sure that at the state of Texas, and again, I bet you this is one that Republicans and Democrats alike are going to get behind, that we make this the best possible place to separate from the military or to retire and come to live. And as you know from all the great military installations across the state of Texas, so many Americans not originally from here have had a taste of Texas over the course of their service. We want this to be the default state they come back to because, the best TDC, the best credentialing program, the best quality of life, everything else that we just talked about earlier. So Cynthia, this is another one where we want to get contact information so that we can follow up with Gina and just find out what the credentials are in this specific case and how that could apply more largely to other veterans coming in with similar circumstances.
Got it.
And Representative Johnson and Wu and I, we really have our work cut out for us. There's a lot of tasks that are coming out of this meeting, but I know that's why that she's here, and I know that she'll help us on this as well.
All right, so many great questions and comments. This is
going to be our last one, but we are going to stay for a little bit afterwards. So if you'd like to say hi or maybe take a picture, we're going to be up on the stage.
Hello, Beto. Nice to meet you. This is my first event. But first, I would like to say thank you, veterans. I appreciate you, and God bless you all. Been trying to kind of figure out like how to word this question, but I just kind of want to follow up on her issue with marijuana. Not a lot of people are educated on how government works, right? Let's just say, for example, I don't want to be negative, like I'm trying to be positive because I support you. Let's just say you're elected, but then Ken Paxton remains Attorney General, right? Yeah, I know.
The people here will not let that happen.
But let's just say that happens, right? I think the law is if somebody has a gram of weed on them, minimum is 90 days in jail, right? But as you as governor, let's just say like Ken Paxton remains Attorney General, and you have district attorneys in cities or around counties like in Texas. Like, how would you ensure like civilians or just regular people don't get thrown in jail for a long period of time just for something so simple? They're not hurting anybody. They're trying to help themselves. For their health, for their family. How would you ensure like someone doesn't get thrown in jail for a long time? Because that's another issue, criminal justice reform. You have a lot of people in jail spending all their life for something so simple, which is not right, and that just messes up their mental health even more, being in an enclosed environment for the rest of their lives or for 10, 15 years.
So this is an interesting question because it gets to what the governor can't do, should or should not do. Now the governor, perhaps working with the Texas Department of Public Safety, can address the prioritization of the possession of small amounts of weed, and in other words, make sure that we're focusing on the really big fish that we need to fry. Human smuggling and trafficking, the trafficking of fentanyl and the kinds of drugs that are actually killing people in our community right now. The spike in gun violence that we're seeing across Houston and across the state of Texas. There's no shortage of real life or death priorities that we want law enforcement to focus on, but a small amount of weed in your pocket is not one of them. In fact, it detracts from being able to focus on the true violent crimes that are taking place right now. And at a time of rising crime in Texas under Greg Abbott, I think we need to get the focus back on where we can do the most good to improve public safety. Now this gets to what a governor should or should not do. I keep mentioning Ann Johnson and Jean Wu, not just because they're two of my favorite people, but because I really believe in our form of government. And there's nothing that the governor on this issue really can or should unilaterally do. We've got to build the consensus in the state. Again, you just pointed out earlier, the consensus is there from public sentiment. 68%, I bet you it's higher than that. I bet the other 32%, I don't want to say this to the pollster, but I'm for it as well. But we need to make sure that we work to address legitimate concerns that lawmakers might have. I mean, is this going to be a gateway drug into doing other things? Is my kid who's in middle school suddenly going to be able to get her hands on marijuana? We might be able to share with them middle school playgrounds are one of the fastest growing markets for marijuana today because it's illegal and drug dealers don't care about your ID or your age. They just want to make sure that you have the cash on them. And in an unregulated market, those kids are absolutely defenseless. I've got a middle schooler. I do not want her using marijuana. While your brain is still developing, it's going to do tough things to your head. I don't want my high schooler using it. And frankly, I'm not advocating for the use of it, but I'm recognizing that there are millions of our fellow Texans who want to be able to do it, some who need to do it literally to stay alive, and they should not be seen as criminals in the eyes of law. I think that's a pretty good common sense argument that's going to be compelling and persuasive to Representative Johnson's colleagues. And then we got to listen to them. And then we say, hey, Beto, look, I'm for you so far as we address this, that, and the other. And we include that in the legislation. So I don't want to mislead you into thinking that as slam dunk an issue as this is in terms of the common sense that it makes, it'll be a slam dunk to get this done once we're in office. One of the things I shared with you earlier today is I think we can functionally end veterans homelessness in my first year of our administration after we win this. That's ambitious, but I know the numbers. I know how many veterans are experiencing homelessness right now. I know the resources that we need to put into this. I know cities that have been able to get this done. I know the model that we can follow. On this one, this is a whole different kind of deal that we have to go after right now. But knowing that you are with us, the majority of Texas is with us, that the governor has extraordinary power, the biggest microphone in the state of Texas, and can use that to direct public sentiment where it's going to create the most political pressure to form the will necessary to get this done. I know that we can do this. I don't know exactly the form it will take, but it's going to have to be working with other people along the way, and you're going to have to be part of it. Voting will simply not be enough on this and other key issues. We're going to have to, after the election, keep the pressure up to make sure that we actually get these things done down the road. Anyhow, thanks for asking. Great question. Cynthia, thanks for facilitating this. Thanks to the VFW folks for hosting us. You guys are amazing. To Rosie for kicking us off, to Sue, Ruth, and Johnson, and other elected officials. You all are amazing. Thank you all for being here, and to our veterans for their service to the country. So grateful to each and every one of you. Gracias.